Greetings. This pen is the Penbbs 266. It's also sold as the model 308, depending on the finish and who you actually buy it from, but it's the same pen. The 266 and the 308, they're the exact same pen. This one has a very interesting finish. It's meant to kind of look like bleached wood with a wood grain, but it is a all acrylic pen. It has a chrome band which says Penbbs, has the little Penbbs logo, and it says 266 on the band. It's got a pretty nice clip. It's got a nice sort of a tapered clip that works very, very well and is very functional. And it's a very traditional sort of cigar-shaped pen. It's sort of an average sized pen. It's not one of those like sort of oversized cigar-shaped pens. So here it is compared to a Lamy Safari and a Pilot Metropolitan. So you can see it's pretty much spot on, the exact same size as these common pens. The pen posts well and posts securely and feels pretty good in the hand. The section is a smooth section with this little lip at the end to give you something to grip onto. It's not a heavy pen at all. It weighs 21 grams, so it's a little bit on the lighter side. The nib is a Penbbs nib, which is somewhat ornate. It says Penbbs. It says since 2005. It says since 2005, has an F for fine, and then it says China on the bottom. So it's decently ornate. The feed on this is a delicate feed. I know I very often say on these inexpensive Chinese pens to remove the nib and the feed, wash them out, etc. That's not really practical with this one because the fins on this feed are extremely thin and extremely delicate. The pen does have the slightly upturned bent nib, which does add a little bit of character to the writing. It's not quite an architect nib to that extreme, but it does. It's a little more interesting than a normal, just sort of flat nib. And this obviously is a steel nib as well. This is a fairly inexpensive pen. Cost about $17. Now, some of the identical model pens in different finishes can cost twice as much. Some of the multicolored finished ones can be quite a bit more expensive than this one. The filling mechanism, as you can probably imagine, is a standard international cartridge converter. I don't see any reason why you couldn't eyedropper this if you really, really wanted to. I don't see any metal parts or holes or anything like that, but don't see much of a point in eyedroppering a pen quite like this. The barrel is not huge. You're not going to get a massive capacity out of this. And the cap takes, let's see, 1, 2 full turns to remove. So that, I think, is pretty much everything we can say about the outside of the pen. Next step is to see how it's going to write. And let's find that out right now. Okay, this is a Penbbs number 266, which is also a.k.a. a 308. It's a nice writing pen. It writes quite smoothly. It's actually lays down quite a fine line, and it's a bit on the dry side in terms of writing. In terms of this bent nib, you can get a little bit of variation due to the bent nature of the nib. So if you do a pure vertical line versus a pure horizontal line, you can see a very tiny bit of line variation here due to the fact that the nib is a bent nib, and it is definitely dependent on the angle that you hold it, but you can get a tiny bit of variation in the line size. In terms of flex, the nib is pretty stiff, but you could squeeze a tiny, and I do mean tiny bit of variation that way, but it is a stiff, it is a fine nib. So it's quite fine, actually. In some quarters, this might actually even be considered an extra fine. So it's a fine nib, a steel nib, a good nib. It's got some decent flow to it, but it is a tiny bit on the dry side. This is also a pretty dry ink as well. Speaking of ink, this is a interesting ink from an interesting vendor. So this ink is from the company Colorverse, which is a Korean company, and they sell lots of different cool inks in different cool configurations, etc. So, but one of the things they make is this set of 4 different color inks. It's a limited edition set. Everything's around a space and astronomy theme. I haven't even opened this set yet. I will do a review of these inks subsequently, but upon purchasing that set, one of the things they did give you was a free bottle of ink, which is what I'm using here. So this is their ink, and this, again, carrying on the space theme, is Colorverse. Kepler's Laws. And this is a pretty nice ink. It comes in the Colorverse bottles are all the interesting shaped bottles here. And this is a tiny little 15 milliliter bottle. The larger bottles are basically the same shape as these, but they're kind of interesting, very interesting shaped bottles with this little tail on it. And the theme of these inks is all sort of planets and astronomy and things like that. So this ink is basically a cherry red with a gold sheen laid on top of it. So depending on the angle that you kind of look at it, you get a certain amount of gold sheen. The underlying red color reminds me of cherry jello. It's sort of that type of red, but then what happens is once it dries, you start to get this gold sheening popping through in a very subtle and sort of interesting way. So this definitely a lot of interesting stuff going on with this ink that I really kind of like, and it's definitely an intriguing ink. It also dries quite quickly. So it's a pretty it's not going to be an ink that smears or anything like that. So you definitely have that going for you. But it's a color and a sheen combination that just gives a lot of interesting stuff going on. So it definitely goes down quite bright cherry red, and then picks up this goldish, almost like I hesitate to say it, but almost a brownish gold sheen that gets picked up on top of it. So there is a lot of interesting stuff going on with this ink, more so than most just inks that normally say, oh, it's blue with a red sheen, and that's just pretty straightforward what it is. This is just saying it's red with a gold sheen doesn't really quite describe it, because it just has this sort of very subtle nature to it, which is unusual, and I like quite a bit. I think that might do it for this episode, though. If you liked it, please subscribe. If you'd like to subscribe, there will be a button right about here which will allow you to do so. If you don't like the episode, please tell me why, and I will endeavor to improve. In any case, bye-bye.